Still isn't.
And call this meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Here.
Kurt? Cindy?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Jay? Excused.
And Jay is excused.
Eric?
Here.
All right. If you would please rise for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I need a motion to approve the minutes. And there are no minutes available for approval, so we will move on to amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move. Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All righty. There's nothing on the docket for public hearings this time. The next item on the agenda is bid awards, and we have a bid award for Power and Light, Municipal Power and Light Building Remodel. And the prior superintendent, Nelson, recommends the award of the project to Rainforest Contracting for an amount not to exceed $538,600. $530,000 was budgeted for this project. At the June 19th meeting, the Assembly voted to postpone the decision to the matter, decision on the matter, to the July 3rd, 2017 meeting. That meeting was canceled due to a lack of a quorum. Borough Manager Giesbrecht contacted Rainforest Contracting to ask if they'd be willing to honor their bid beyond the 45-day deadline, and they said that they would. Do we have a motion to approve the bid?
So move. Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to move forward with the Power and Light Building Remodel. All those, will the clerk call the roll?
Discussion on it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here trying to clean the fog out of my throat. Yes, let's please do have discussion on it.
So if we have until past the initial 45 days allotted during the solicitation phase, how much longer could we have if we wanted to further investigate some of the ins and outs of this moving?
If I may, I think this is pretty much it. I mean, Rainforest was really, really nice of them to allow that these bids stay, that they honor the prices that they put forward. And the architect worked that out with them. I can't take credit for that. I called the architect that did the project, and she reached out to Rainforest. But I think at this point, it's up. The Assembly needs to either accept the bids or refuse all bids. And I recommend that we accept it. But if the Assembly doesn't want to go that direction today, then we would need to refuse the bids so Rainforest doesn't have to kind of be hanging out to dry anymore.
Yes, Bob.
I was just, Carl, would you be willing to just talk about the architect? I think the architect sent us a letter on what this really did for us. Would you be really willing to reiterate those points?
Sure. Assembly and Member Lynn, the project is a remodel project. The building itself is quite old, and when it was built, the current standards as far as ADA are concerned weren't even in scope. So a lot of the work that I see in the plans addresses ADA issues with the building. It provides an ADA accessible reception area at the front of the building on the ground floor, where folks with handicaps can come into the building, and then staff would come down the stairs to them to be served, instead of paying for an elevator or some other means to get those folks upstairs. Staff will be coming down to meet them. Additionally, there are some ADA improvements at the back of the building in the small parking area between the headquarters building and the one of the generator sheds. There is plans for an ADA space in that parking area, so folks can park there and then navigate their way to the front of the building on the sidewalk. There are some really, in my opinion as a public works director, very good improvements to the front of the building in that they're going to slice off a section of the corner of the downstairs of the building to improve sight distance at that intersection. That's been a problem, for since that building's, existed, and to get that addressed, mitigated at least somewhat is really a positive thing. In doing that, they've got to rework the stairs to get upstairs. That changes the foyer area upstairs and some of the reception areas. They're going to reconfigure that existing reception space somewhat. But a lot of the superintendent's office will remain pretty much the same. The office manager's office will remain the same. There'll be some improvements to exterior siding, and they're going to do some insulation on the outside of the building envelope to improve efficiency of the building and reside the whole building. So it's I think those are the highlights, and I think those were included in the architect's letter. But it's a fairly basic project, but it will improve ADA accessibility, and like I said, it will improve the sight distance to that intersection a lot.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Nancy?
I'd just like to make an observation. A major concern I had about this was the ADA compliance, and I'm glad to see that it's been taken care of. I'll be supporting this.
All right. If there's no other questions, will the clerk please call the roll?
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
All right, and that passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is visitors' views related to the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? And we do have one letter that we will read too. Okay, we'll start with Brian.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the Assembly. I'm Brian Lynch. I have a couple of comments and issues here. The first one I'll put on my Rivers Without Borders hat, and I'm glad to see you have this letter to the governor concerning requesting federal engagement, explicitly requesting federal engagement on this with an actual letter to the State Department. While I know there's some frustration or cynicism involved with this, that how many letters and resolutions do you have to send to get some sort of action? Well, I think that we have to keep up constant pressure here to make sure that we do have federal engagement so we can develop enforceable regulations and develop some sort of system for recouping costs of from any disaster that we might see or contamination we might see on the transboundary rivers. But as far as keeping up constant pressure, well, it's still somewhat in the rumor stage. We've learned in the last couple of days that the BC may be moving on an issue, a major issue we've had for years, that some positive things that we've heard. It hasn't been made public yet, and we're hoping within the next couple of days it will be on what's happening. But those actions are being undertaken, as far as I can see, because there has been constant pressure on BC to do something about this particular issue. But so you can't really give up. You have to keep pressuring our political leaders to do something here. And the second issue is, for me personally, is hope you approve Resolution 2017-15 on the $500,000 for developing the Scow Bay boatyard facility. I think this is personally, and for full disclosure, I do sit on the Economic Development Council. But I think, with me personally, I think this is exactly the sort of thing that money was set aside for. And I think that any sort of improvement in infrastructure that benefits our fishing fleets is going to have, great positive economic impact on this community. So hopefully that you will approve that, and hopefully the voters will approve it also. Anyway, thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to field them.
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Richard.
I'm representing myself, Richard Burke, and on the ATV OHV initiative. I'm out of respect for a number of the folks that signed the petition. I'm asking today for the Assembly to send this to the ballot. It'll make town a better place, but we can have those arguments in September. And yeah, that's what I want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you. John and then Cynthia.
I'd like to speak on 15C. Could I do that? Wait till it's introduced? Okay.
It's up to you, Mayor.
We can wait. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Good afternoon. My name's Cynthia Wallace. I'm representing United Southeast Alaska Gill Netters. I wrote the letter that's in your packet regarding the letter about the transboundary waters going to the governor and lieutenant governor. So mostly I was just here. I'll be here to answer any questions you have along with Brian about the issue as you're discussing it and thinking about it. But while I have the mic for just a second, I wouldn't mind plugging the fact that we're a region-wide organization made up of gill netters. We have 206 members, 40 of which live here in Petersburg. And this is a really important issue for everyone in our membership. So whenever we kind of gauge that, it comes out to be an important issue, the protecting of our resource. So so I know that they'll be happy that I'm here today, and that you appreciated this letter enough to put it in your packet and discuss it. So I'll just be here for questions when the time comes. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else? And we have this letter to read. Thank you for the reminder.
It's actually unrelated to agenda, so the next agenda item.
And if there are no other visitors' views related to the agenda, the next item on the agenda is visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. And we have received a letter from Don Koenig, which the Borough Clerk will read.
My name is Don Koenig, resident of Petersburg, representing myself. I am unable to attend the Assembly meeting of 7/17/2017 due to a scheduled medical appointment in Anchorage. I request this letter be read at the meeting and be entered into the public record under Item 8, Visitors' Views Unrelated to the Agenda. Subject, restructure of the utility departments. Herewith are my observation and thoughts regarding the restructuring of the utility departments as proposed by the borough manager with the intent of saving the borough money. Review of this proposal brings to one's attention that the manager is endeavoring to create a position to be filled by a pre-selected individual to manage 3 utilities. As such, if put into play, it will most likely make it very difficult to recruit for this position at some future point in time. The proposal is flawed, in my opinion, for this very reason. The community of Petersburg has been well served by employing competent electrical utility managers during the past 40 years. Agreed, the community does not need to hire an individual with an electrical engineering degree, but if an applicant has the credentials and other desired qualifications, then all the better for the community. Hire the best qualified person within budgetary constraints. The Assembly should advertise to fill the electrical superintendent position vacated by the retirement of Mr. Joe Nelson after 14 years of service. The community has been ably served by Mr. Nelson and other competent managers dedicated to keeping the lights on. Throughout their tenure, they have ably provided administrative oversight, and developed a utility crew that routinely works on highly energized transmission lines in a safe and effective manner. The electrical utility is in good working condition and financially sound. However, the electric utility is in constant need of maintenance. The generator at Crystal Lake Hydro is in need of urgent rewinding. The main street transformer, I think it says, located downtown requires work. Both are critical to providing electricity to our community, and this work will cost close to $3 million to refurbish the equipment. The criteria for the superintendent should remain as noted in the borough's job description in its entirety as revised 6/6/2017. Under qualifications, add second sentence, a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. Third sentence should read, or 5 to 7 years of electrical staff supervision and leadership experience for a minimum of 6 to 10 employees. Fourth sentence should read, experience as a manager or supervisor in an electrical utility environment in a decision-making role. A copy of the electrical superintendent job description is attached. Recommended changes are in red. On May 10th, 2017, the borough manager letter to the assembly requested the approval of the restructuring of the borough's utility management personnel. I think he means personnel. Community interest in this proposal has generated considerable discussion within the community. The borough manager has stated that he has declared war on those who oppose his plan. Truthfully, is this declaration in the best interest of the community? I rather hope he and the assembly can serve the community without creating division. On May 30th, 2017, the Borough Assembly, by motion, adjourned into an executive session to discuss potential financial, safety, and personnel matters relating to the restructuring of Petersburg's electric utility. It passed unanimously. Entered at 11:57 p.m. and ended at 1:07 p.m., and then adjourned without discussion or action taken. Ron Lesh, representing himself and the Pilot newspaper, commented on the agenda item regarding the justification for the executive session and requested the Assembly discuss the subject of the session in an open meeting and referenced the State of Alaska Open Meeting Act as reason for not excluding the public from the discussion. A member of the Assembly informed me that Mr. Nelson was invited to participate in this executive session, but he chose not to. If this is true, then in my opinion, it was a wise decision. The question remains, was Mr. Nelson invited to the meeting? He would be the only person who could have adequately addressed issues relating to the subject of safety in the proposed plan of restructuring of the electrical utility. Within days, individuals began talking about the Assembly's decision to handle this matter behind the screen of executive privilege. Now it has initiated a petition to consider the potential recall of some of the Assembly members. The Petersburg Pilot issue of July 6th notes that the borough manager has now appointed an interim electrical superintendent and an administrator of the electrical department. Each position comes with a significant pay increase for the employee. Full disclosure of wages and benefits were omitted. The borough manager stated that he could not come up with a title for the administrator position. The title might be assistant borough manager. Did the borough manager have approval from the Assembly to create these positions? And if so, when was this approved by a vote of the Assembly? Or is the public to assume that this was discussed during the executive session of May 30th, 2017? If it stems from the latter, this would be violation of the Alaska State Open Meeting Act, as it would have required the Assembly to proceed with action and a vote upon reconvening the meeting. Troubling how the Assembly is conducting business and not being transparent, nor publicly setting an agenda for the borough manager to follow regarding the PM&L department. It is perceived that all that is needed to save money is to restructure the electric utility department with an administrator with virtually no electrical background. It would be similar to approving this person to head the police department. Perhaps it would be prudent to consider eliminating the assistant director's position of public works to save money. Two options you may consider in moving forward on this matter. Appoint an advisory committee to review the proposed restructuring of the PMP department as proposed by the borough manager, or consider advertising for the PMPL superintendent position as outlined in the amended job description qualification which I have proposed. Respectfully, Don Koenigs.
Any comments or clarification? All right. Moving on. Then, oh, yes, I'm sorry. Chelsea.
Good afternoon. My name's Chelsea Tremblay. I'm here representing myself, and I'm here to talk really quickly about the meeting about homelessness that's happening on Wednesday evening. Some backstory, the first meeting we had on this issue was called by Annette Wooten, and that was last month. We held it at the library. About 31 people, besides Annette and myself, were there, and the audience ranged from people who had no idea that there was a homeless issue in town to people that have been personally very aware of it, either because they work in the field or because they've been on the brink or past that point themselves. So it was a really good discussion. We had some visitors in town who happened to, one was on a board of the Anchorage group working with homelessness, which was just coincidence and pretty magical to hear his perspective. He's been dealing with that for 30 years. So it was a great meeting, and we came away, some people knowing, everyone knowing a lot more. For example, we learned that for a lot of the homeless folk that we know of in town, we know that substance use is a linked issue, but it is also just families who are both working and they can't find a place to rent in town, just lack of housing. So that was last week's meeting, and so it basically became clear that it's a systemic issue that's had a long history in town, even if you aren't immediately aware of it in your own social circle. And so housing just being too expensive for many people, not having adequate spaces. And so I brought something that Annette found. It's the Juneau's Most Vulnerable Homeless Population. It's a pamphlet from the Juneau, or a paper from the Juneau Homeless Coalition. They did some research and were able to break down some statistics about who they were able to identify in Juneau as homeless and some stats that they can use for grants and for moving forward. So that's the kind of information that would be really great to have concerning Petersburg residents that find themselves in that situation, like what brought them to that point, what could help them get their way out of it. And so I'm not here to say that I have all the answers, and I'm also not expecting you to, because I don't try not to micromanage what other people may know. And so I'd just like to extend the offer to anyone who's interested in the issue and would like to learn more. We're meeting again this week at the library at 6:30, and that's in the community room. And it's just a group of volunteers. Some people who also work in the field are able to come and share their expertise. So that's, again, 6:30 Wednesday in the library community room. They can contact myself or Annette if they're not able to make it and they would like to figure out how they could help. And I just wanted to also take a second to thank all of you, assembly members, borough employees, Giesbrecht, so many others who, you all do your jobs very well. And we have an uncertain future, as we all know. But I think that a lot of you make really great long-term plans for the town, and I feel very confident that we have a lot of tools in our belt that we can bring forward and come together and make some stuff happen. So thank you for that. Thank you for all of your time, and good luck with the rest of your meeting.
All right.
Chelsea.
Any questions? Yeah.
Chelsea. Real quick, regarding that meeting on Wednesday at 6:30, the library, how, is there an agenda for this yet, or?
No, this is kind of the meeting that we're still seeing who will be coming to these meetings, what they'll be bringing to the table. Annette and I started to host these meetings around addiction around this time last year. And the way those things kind of turned into was whoever was able to make it would come, bring their expertise, bring their ideas, and then if anyone did have the capacity and skill set to take on a project, then they did. So for example, I researched books and DVDs to bring into the library around substance use. I reached out to the hospital to talk to them about doing spots on substance use as a their medical spot on the KFSK, like reached out to them, asked if they could do that. Annette did more with her stuff. Petersburg Mental Health picked up more pieces from what we were talking about. And so And then housing is something that was very much linked with the addiction question. And so just because a lot of people stay in unsafe or unhealthy situations because they can't find any other place to go. And so, and that's been dealing with that a lot with the wave people who stay in, life-threatening situations because they don't have a place to go. And so I think what we're hoping to see with this meeting is, really anyone who's interested, anyone who has capacity, because it's anything from short-term solutions, how do we help people who are camping during a really, cold winters and rainy summers? How do we help those folks stay healthy? Because as the Juno number breaks down, people who are in vulnerable situations are 3 to 4 times more likely to die prematurely because of the living situations that they find themselves in. So there's short-term, there's long-term. How do we develop long-term housing? Because we had some great institutional knowledge at the last meeting that talked about, people have been homeless in this town for 20 plus years. It's not a very recent issue. So it's something that we have been kind of not dealing with for a while. So so anyone with any capacity or interest, even just breaking down that barrier of not knowing, not realizing, and then also deconstructing the idea of who we think of as homeless, that there's a way that you can spot someone and stigmatize someone that way. Like, you can't necessarily look at someone to know if they're homeless or on the brink of it. We have an image in our mind, but that doesn't always match up with reality. And so I think that's an important part of what we're trying to do too, is also encourage people that if they are finding themselves on the edge to ask for help and, tell us what we can do. Because a lot with this Juno, I'll leave, if there are any extras, I'll leave them by the front. What the Juno numbers are able to do is really break down who it is and how they got to that point. And that's stuff that we just don't know, the numbers. And the number that they came up with was 40 people that they know of, but in town. But that's also wildly unscientific because we've never really done a substantial count and that kind of thing. So
You're saying 40 people in Petersburg? Mm-hmm. Do you have any sense, or does any organization have any sense whether that number is stable or increasing or decreasing?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard, because I think that the increasing difficulty with substance use, because that problem's been here for a long time, but the way it is getting more impact, it's more impacting people's lives more deeply, I think. And so I think that is getting a lot of people who were able to kind of couch surf and move between homes, like, as their problems get worse, then they find themselves kind of burning those bridges. But again, that's me talking about one segment of the homeless community in town. For other people who just can't find an apartment because the house they were living in sold, like, I don't know about that, if that's same or different. So that's, yeah, that'd be something that, if the realtors in town or people who rent, like, it's going to be a lot of anecdotal stuff, and especially the police department, they deal with kind of the same group of people, and those are folks that their situation tends to get more criminalized because they were living in a place that's getting demolished or something like that, so they're dealing with a certain group, but there's other groups that are just kind of hard to track. And then, of course, we have people that come out to work for the summer because they don't have any other place to go, so they take the job with the bunkhouses because then they have a place to stay. So, yeah, all kinds of questions. Thanks for letting me take up more time. Any other questions before I?
No, thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, Richard.
Richard Burke again. This time I'm representing planning and zoning. Jumping on the topic she was just talking about, it's something that we can address with changing some of our zoning rules. And so I would invite some people that are interested in that to come to the planning and zoning meeting and talk to the members. Because, for instance, we've got no tiny houses are often used to house homeless. Currently, under our current zoning code, they're not allowed. So, and we seem to be losing a trailer a year due to a fire, or sometimes even more often than that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's something that planning and zoning really should also be working on. But that wasn't really why I came here. 6 weeks ago, I approached the Assembly on behalf of planning and zoning about airport parking. And the only response I've gotten is an email from Cindy saying she likes the idea, but I need more than just an email to move forward with this project. I need a resolution from the assembly because you represent the people of Petersburg saying you support this idea. We're not asking for any money at this time. And
I will, in response to that, we've actually explored that question a little bit, and I think we need to flesh out a little bit more the mechanics of what the state would allow, what it actually could potentially cost us, and are there any cost recovery mechanisms? I'm still interested in the idea. We have not dropped that one, and I actually made a note to myself last night that I wanted to pursue that question, so thank you for bringing that up. Go ahead.
The other part of that, Richard, is I think we need to look at that existing parking, and I think that could be reconfigured over there to add more cars and to change the traffic flow a bit. I think as part of this question that Cindy's asking, and I think planning and zoning needs to look at it also.
And I was also, one thing that the borough could also look at to help with the parking situation is to look at increasing the cost of the parking tickets. Right now it's $10. It's not even worth the cop's time to write the ticket. 20 years ago I got a $35 ticket for parking. Didn't break me. I think we really should look at increasing the fines, just at least for that right now. And I think if you bump it up to $40, $50, then it suddenly isn't laughable anymore, but it's not going to break somebody, and it's going to certainly encourage people to not park there long term. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other visitors' views unrelated to the agenda? Seeing none. The next item is board, commission, and committee reports, and none have been filed. And we do not have anything on the consent agenda. So the next item on our agenda is report of other officers, and Borough Clerk Deborah Thompson has submitted affidavits of mailing and LID petition results. Do you want to speak to that, Deb?
Well, per code, I am just to notify you that who the LID information went out to. So there's copies of the mailing lists in here and basically what was sent. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like things worked out for the LID this time. And we did not get enough response to move forward.
But I still want to thank staff and the public for getting involved in the process. We tested it out and tried to make it work, and it was a good experiment, and we gave it a good try. The next item on the agenda is the mayor's report. And we had the municipal building dedication. The borough held its renovated municipal building dedication on July 4th, 2017, and gave tours to community members, and we had a nice representation of folks that were there for the ribbon cutting, and also a stream of folks that came through for tours, and staff has offered to take people through the building if they were not able to come at that time. You can arrange a time to come through the building and take a look and see what has been done here. The borough is also seeking letters of interest from Petersburg residents willing to serve our community by filling one vacant seat on the hospital board until the October 2017 municipal election. We're getting kind of short on that. Letters of interest may be addressed to the borough clerk and emailed to dthompson@petersburgak.gov, mailed to P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, AK 99833, or dropped off at the Borough Administration Office at 12 South Nordic Drive. The Historic Preservation Commission is also seeking letters of interest for 3 vacant seats on the commission. Seat 1 is reserved for an archaeologist or an at-large member, and the term of this seat ends 12/31/2017. Seat 2 is reserved for an assembly member with a term ending 12/31/2019. Seat 3 is reserved for a planning commissioner with a term ending 12/31/2018. Letters of interest may be submitted to the borough clerk as outlined earlier. Appointment of a Southeast Conference representative. Mark Jensen was our assembly representative to the Southeast Conference, and we need to appoint a new one. I had queried the assembly and asked if anybody was interested, and at this point, I haven't received any response from anybody. So if it's fine with folks, I will step into that until the October election. We've got a conference coming up, and probably a conference call or two in the interim, so I'll be happy to do that. Citizens initiative petitions. Both the initiative petition regarding the operation and use of off-highway vehicles on the borough-owned and maintained streets, and the initiative petition regarding prohibiting the addition of fluoride to the borough water system were recently certified as sufficient and will therefore be placed on the municipal election ballot in October. And then for payment in lieu of taxes and secure rural schools funding, the borough received its annual PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, payment for the 2016-2017 budget year. We budgeted $550,000 and actually received $567,532. We have also budgeted to receive the $550,000 in the 2017-2018 budget year. The Secure Rural Schools timber receipts federal payment has not been received. We knew it was questionable, and we did not budget to receive it for 2016-17 or 2017-2018. If that money comes in, it goes directly to the schools. The borough has not ever used that for operating funds, and the tax increase that we approved earlier in the year was due to the anticipation that this money would not be received. The North End Ferry Authority is reconstituting the Rainforest Island Ferry, and Steve Bellegarde of Kaufman Cove contacted the borough recently to introduce himself as the newest member of the 3-person ferry board for the North End Ferry Authority. The board is inviting the borough to appoint a local qualified business person to the North End Ferry Authority Board of Directors. Their current plan is to sell the existing ferry and acquire a smaller passenger vessel that is newer, faster, and people-friendly. They are looking at a new 40-foot, 36-passenger vessel with 3 400-horsepower diesel jet drives. The cruise is at 30-plus miles per hour at a 27-gallon-per-hour burn rate. The current ferry takes $1,800 per day for captain and deckhand plus fuel. This vessel will cost around $500 per day to go from Kaufman to Wrangell to Petersburg and return the same route. So, if anybody from the business community is interested in participating on this board, please contact the borough clerk and we will make arrangements to nominate you to that board position. There's a special assembly meeting. The assembly will hold a special meeting at noon on Monday, July 31st. The regularly scheduled meeting on July 3rd was canceled due to a lack of a quorum, so we need to move business forward. And then municipal elections, election day is October 3rd. Individuals who wish to run for available seats may file for candidacy July 25th through August 22nd. Please contact the clerk's office for more information, and there is also information on the borough webpage, I believe. The last day to register to vote for this election is September 3rd. Voter registration forms are available at the front desk of the borough offices. And then there is one other item that came up after the agenda was put together, and that is that the new fast response Coast Guard cutter is going to be in town tomorrow, and it will be berthed at North Harbor Float 1, where the Kestrel normally is, but it's taking off tomorrow. And they will be doing tours for the public from 1 to 4 p.m., so we invite everybody to come out and see the John McCormick is the name of the vessel, and it will be serving the Petersburg area, but it will be housed in Ketchikan. But the Coast Guard graciously has offered to let the public tour that facility, so I invite you to do that. And moving on to the manager's report.
Thank you. Big thank you from Parks and Rec to the entire 4th of July committee, Julie Anderson, Mackenzie Peter, TJ and Breda, Nancy Berg, Angela Denning, Andrew Poost, and Mara Lutomsky. Also, a big thank you to all the businesses in town that sponsored and supported the 4th of July, and to Public Works and the Parks and Rec staff for helping set up the tent and the Harbor Games. Everybody pulled together an amazing weekend full of fun events. Thank you very much. Officer Pop is teamed up with Parks and Rec last week to run a one-week summer camp focused on safety topics, including gun safety, bike safety, water safety, and internet safety. The Sally Port in our new police department, remodeled police department building is operational. We do still have some punch list items to work through. Thanks to Joe Bertignoli for his assistance in helping us work through those with the contractor. Officers Wachter and Tate will be headed to Fairbanks for the initial academy training next month. The PD is hosting a sexual assault response team meeting with the stakeholders in the training room on July 18th. Discussion will include training for the team planned in September. The library has replaced our public Wi-Fi equipment with the help of our IT vendor. This has resolved some of our problems that we've had with the quality of access for our public Wi-Fi users. Summer Reading Challenge ended July 16th. Participants completed over 1,300 educational challenges, and congratulations to all of them. The library wanted to thank the public and the police department for helping us solve a recent theft. I believe after being identified on the camera, the person in question returned what they tried to steal. So thank everyone, including that person, for having a conscience. Nordic Electric has completed running wires to connect all of the smoke alarms at elderly housing with the fire panel at assisted living. All strobe alarms have been installed, as well as new smoke detectors. Simplex will be in town to inspect, program, and test the new system here shortly. Paging system, remember we had some issues with that. We made some backed up a little bit on some of our wireless transmissions that we were working on, and it has been flawless since then. Procom, which is a vendor we've used for some radio work, and is kind of going through the process of helping us assist to make sure we have no interference going forward, just in case somebody else decides to broadcast on the same bandwidth. We did get some new entry carpet installed at elderly housing, and Ken's Painting will be starting the assisted living exterior painting project in August. Kind of our nuisance, one of several nuisance issues, but the one up at Lumber Street has been resolved, and just wanted to thank a very cooperative property owner and the police department for all their help in resolving some of that. Since we put it online about a year ago, our online property viewer has received over 8,300 views. So continue to be well used, and thanks to Liz and her staff for getting that up. Public Works crew rebuilt a block of the sewer main on Excel Street between 7th and 8th Street, and assisted the water department staff with removing many logs and root wads from the Cabin Creek Reservoir, and replaced the log boom at the reservoir. Currently, if you might see them out, Public Works has been working on the shoulders of Cabin Creek Road. They're becoming a bit overgrown with trees and brush in many areas. Public Works is using the large excavator to remove large trees, and the small excavator with brush cutter to clear the rest of the foliage from the shoulders. Just be conscious of them when they're out working, and make sure no one gets hurt. With assistance from water plant staff, Carl has developed a fluoride fact sheet that describes the fluoridation system and the safeguards that are in place for the operators and public, and that will be available for the public to see and read through. AT&T has installed the internet connections to the water treatment plant, wastewater plant, and the baler. Once we have the firewall appliances here and installed, our network services to those facilities should be much improved. This was our backup plan. We tried shooting a wireless signal to get out to them, and we had some interference issues at the manor. This solves that. Cost us a little bit more money though, because we had to buy the firewalls and install them, as well as pay for internet service. But it avoids the whole issue of interference with the paging system. Fjord contractors recently completed a reconfiguration of the baler office to improve efficiency for the scale attendants and the customer. Staff is very happy with those changes. A surplus auction will be advertised this month. There will also be advertisements made on the public surplus website for vehicles that have proven hard to sell locally. Power and Light has finished an equipment and supplies inventory and also been working on cleanup at the Blind Slough Hydro, which has included tree removal and repairs to equipment and infrastructure at that location. Staff, including Jody, Glorianne, and myself, are continuing to work with the Army Corps, PIA, and the Borough Attorney on finalizing an agreement that will save the Harbor Department up to $325,000 on the South Harbor Dredge Project feasibility study. Thanks to everyone involved in that as we work through it.
All right, that sounds good.
That's it.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah. I had a question kind of aimed at the chief. I was wondering if you might be able to speak a little bit about the training for those two officers ongoing up in Fairbanks.
It's their initial academy training. It's required for certification. So they'll leave next month and be back in early to mid-November. So it's a pretty extensive training, and specific boxes they have to check during that, but it's just a standard academy.
Okay, so these officers, who we have here on the force now, but they just haven't gone through the academy yet?
Right. The way the regulations are set up, they can begin field training before the academy, but they need to complete field training and the academy within the first year of employment to get their certification.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you, Jeff.
All
Sorry
right,
about that.
thank you. Yeah, we just closed the door just to eliminate some background noise.
I had a question
Go right ahead.
regarding the North End Ferry Authority.
Yes.
So is this going to be a ferry system that they want to use the existing ferry terminal out the road, or is this something that they're planning to come to town? And it's just part of my overall question. This is one of those things where they're probably going to ask us for some money to operate this, and I'm trying to sort out in the fiscal crisis that we're in, how do we add one more thing to?
Yeah. At this point, they have not asked us for money.
Yep.
I'm kind of like you. I'm wondering when. To my knowledge, they're planning on using Banana Point, but we don't even know that.
Okay.
So we got an email. Let's say their first iteration, that was their plan, was to use Banana Point because they couldn't get DOT to make modifications to the South End Ferry terminal. Maybe they'll have more luck this time, but with a smaller boat, they might be looking at coming in and out of Banana Point. We'll get involved in that at a certain point when they actually pick a boat and start talking to us, because we've had concerns for some time that adding that kind of a boat to Banana Point might do damage to that ramp, which then affects it for everyone else who uses it for other reasons. So we got involved purely at that point to do some pictures and to kind of consult with them to say, you know, here's what condition it's in now. If we see damage, are you going to be responsible? Imagine we would do the same if they get this up and running. But again, back to your original question, no, they haven't asked us for money yet.
Yep.
I'm just not sure how they're going to operate
Sure.
long term. And the other group didn't ask us for money either, and it just didn't work out. So we'll see what happens.
Yep. Thank you.
One thing that they mentioned is they still have some debt to retire, but they haven't yet identified whether selling the old ferry would cover that debt or whether there's some other mechanisms that they're looking at. So lots of questions, but certainly an interesting proposal. And as we said before, if there's anybody from the business community, they're looking for representation on their board. So. All right. Moving on to the next item, there's nothing on the agenda for unfinished business, so we move to new business. And the first item under new business is Ordinance 2017-11, an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the FY 2018 budget for known changes. At the June 19th, 2017 meeting, the Borough Assembly voted to proceed with a loan application to ADEC for the Casino Street sewer main replacement in the amount of $160,000. The preliminary loan application has now been submitted. However, the project needs to be included in the borough's FY18 capital project budget. And so do I have a motion to move this ordinance forward?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn, to approve ordinance 2017-11. Is there any discussion?
Well, it seems like a pretty good sum of money. I appreciate that we know rate increases because it's already been planned into the capital improvement project plan. And a 1.5% interest sounds pretty dang great.
Any other questions or commentary? Is there anything else that you wanted to say about that, Carl, or are we good? All right. Hearing nothing else, will the clerk please call the roll?
Cindy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that moves forward unanimously. The next item is ordinance 2017-12, an ordinance amending section 4.24.050 of the Petersburg Borough Code relating to property tax exemptions to include the State of Alaska optional exemption for approved fire protection systems and directing that the amendment be submitted to the voters of the Borough. On June 12, 2017, the governor signed SB 100 that turned the mandatory property tax exemption for structures with sprinkler systems into an optional exemption. In Petersburg, all tax exemptions must be approved by the voters. This would simply retain the sprinkler exemption into the future years. And do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Castro, seconded by Member Strand, that we approve ordinance 2017-12. Is there any discussion? Yes, Eric.
Personally, I believe as a community, we want to encourage property owners to install these systems because it helps protect more than the community's infrastructure and businesses, more so than just the business who spends the time and money to install these. What I'm curious about, though, is Sandy's outlook on it and the view that the department has.
So I will admit that Assemblymember Castro sent me an email asking me these questions, and I kind of deferred them to Ryan. I didn't follow up to make sure that the questions were answered. But the fire department obviously supports the exemption. It encourages property owners to have the fire suppression system installed, especially businesses. And I know the borough has honored it because it was a state thing before. I do realize it's a loss of some revenue, but we need some type of incentive to make it safe for the community. And obviously sprinkler systems are going to put out a fire much quicker and help reduce loss faster than just relying on the fire department or the community to detect a fire. So I would suggest that the assembly support a continuation of the exemption.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Actually, in reading into it too, it looks like there's only a possibility of making an additional $3,300 from repealing the 2% property tax exemption. So. And that's kind of pennies, if we're to lose one business downtown.
Well, it's not just potential loss of property, it's potential loss of life too, so.
Yep.
All right. If there's no other discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And that ordinance 2017-12 passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is Resolution 17-15, the resolution of the Petersburg Borough directing the borough clerk to submit to the qualified voters of the borough the question of spending up to $500,000 from the Economic Fund towards cost-sharing the development of a small vessel haul-out and work yard at Scow Bay. The Petersburg Economic Development Council, the Harbor Advisory Board, private sector and interested parties have worked together to create a conceptual plan for the development of a small vessel haul-out and work yard at Scow Bay turnaround site. Although any such expenditure will also require assembly approval, they would like the borough clerk to first submit the question of whether the assembly should be authorized to spend up to a total of $500,000 from the Borough Economic Fund for local cost sharing necessary to develop the haul-out and work yard to the voters. at the next regular general municipal election to be held October 3rd, 2017. And do I have a motion on this resolution?
So moved.
I move to approve.
I have, first, I need a second.
Oh, second.
It's been moved by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Strand, that we approve Resolution 17-15. Is there any discussion? We'll start with Bob, and then we'll go to Jeff.
First, I want to ask Liz what that $500,000 will buy us.
The intent of the $500,000 is to use towards cost sharing when we apply for federal grants. Generally speaking, there's a required local cost share associated with that. And so for us to be able to commit to the granting agency that we have that money, we have to have the authority to be able to spend it and say, yeah, we have it in hand. So the amount was based on what we could hope to get from the Economic Development Administration. Generally, they have a 25% cost share requirement. Their grants range up to $2 million. So for a $500,000 local match, we would expect to get a $2 million grant from that agency. That's one of the grants we're looking at. Others don't have that type of match requirement, but matches are certainly encouraged. So anytime we would put together a grant package for this project, we would include that $500,000 as the local contribution. But hopefully that's what you're asking as opposed to the actual
that's part
infrastructure.
Of it. And then what is the project itself was $7 million plus. I don't remember the exact figure. So what is $2 million in, or $2.5 million buy us to the $7 million?
So the $2.5 million, I've been working with the engineer to phase that $7 million out over different segments where you could still have a standalone project for less than that. So the $2.5 million would pretty much cover most of the earthwork portion of it. So if you look at the design that's up on the wall there, you can see that where the existing land is gray, and then we would be able to add most of that yellow and build out, including the ramp down for that $2.5 million.
Would that?
Do you want me to show you on the?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So all of this is the 7.1 million. So when we're talking about 2.5 million, we're talking mostly about this yellow here, probably out to like halfway here, and then the ramp. It wouldn't include boarding floats or washdown pads or any of those sewer things or anything like that. We might be able to put some of that infrastructure in, but it wouldn't be hooked up. So primarily just kind of this earthwork lines of it.
Would it include the breakwater when it comes out?
So the breakwaters here, we probably could get partway out. I'm not sure that we would get the entire shebang for the $2.5 million. The next phase of the project really gets us more into the details of the engineering and hardens some of those cost estimates. So then we would know, which is what the engineers are working on now, is the cost estimate for getting us to the 35% design, and then we can get some better numbers. So we would use what we have now in a grant package. If we were pushing something forward, we'd be basing on the next sort of more detailed version.
And then what would this do then for our existing permit holder out there?
So, what it really gains you is you can haul boats out at a greater portion of the tide, so you don't have to have such a high tide, greater window to bring in boats. It also scoots it over against this breakwater, and I'm sure John could tell you better than I.
Can you step closer to the mic so they can pick it up on the radio? Thank you.
Like I can't, yeah.
Or you can move the mic if you need to.
I could just, I have it memorized, I'm sure. As you move the ramp closer to the breakwater, then you're protected. And so John can probably speak to how many times he's had to not haul a boat because of those winds coming across the bay
and he's very supportive of moving that into that breakwater. So you would increase the time period when you could haul, so that would allow you to actually haul more boats out over one tide, and then have less interruption because of weather. And the grade is more or less the same as the existing ramp, but it's a lot lower grade than you would see like at South Harbor for a recreational ramp. It's actually not very steep. If you've been out there before, it's more or less the same as what we have right now. That's about it.
Thank you.
And then you had some questions, too?
It wasn't a question, but I'm just really in support of this plan. I think we're really missing out. I've been over to the Wrangle Boat Yard many times, and that's just turning into a big city over there, all the support services. And I think in a time where we're looking for some economic development, this is going to be a good opportunity to kind of maybe help us get there.
I'm totally in favor of this as well, but I wonder if we need to educate people the difference between the Petersburg Economic Development Fund and the general fund, or money from the city. A little education might be in order.
Just that they're separate ones, and we're talking
Right.
about taking this from the Economic Development
Right.
Fund. That's correct. And then I also wanted to give John an opportunity to speak because we deferred your comments from the earlier portion of the meeting, so you're welcome to come up to the mic.
Mayor and Assembly members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is John Merkes. Middle name is Impatient. Development of, and I am the owner of Island Ventures LLC, doing business as Petersburg Marine. Development of the Scout Bay turnaround as a vessel haul-out facility is long overdue, and I commend the Petersburg Economic Development Council for taking on this project. Although the plan is conceptual, it is still a plan and is well underway towards an eventual $7 to $8 or even a $9 million project if a 100-ton trailer is included. The plan is based in part, and I stress in part, on observations of my use of hydraulic trailers for hauling vessels up to 45 ton on the Scout Bay turnaround. When I first came up with the idea of using a hydraulic trailer in Petersburg, it was thought by many to be crazy, to put it mildly. The combination of the Scout Bay turnaround basin, geography, and physical specifications of our commercial fleet are unique and, to my knowledge, unmatched in North America. There are hundreds of hydraulic trailer operations out there, but none that match our combinations, so you will be continuing to, quote, write the book, unquote, on this project. I purchased the first trailer 10 years ago, but only after traveling the country for several years, visiting marinas that use them. Each trailer is custom built for each customer. There is no one model that fits all. I've had the newest trailer, which is self-propelled, only a few years, and we are still learning and expanding its envelope with each maximum weight haul. Information and advice that I provided the P&D engineers only a few months ago already needs to be amended, and each month we're expanding the envelope and pass that around. Hauling larger vessels. The most critical part of the project is the new ramp, including location, its physical characteristics, and related accessories, including the dock. At the last two public meetings on the project, a temporary rock ramp adjacent to the present spit was discussed. That would be located right along here and adjacent to the present spit. The spit would protect it from wind and waves and tremendously improve the safety of my operation and provide invaluable information on the best design of the eventual permanent ramp and could possibly change the overall scope of the project. Local contractors estimate its cost at $20,000 on a 4-day job. That may be optimistic, but even at twice the price, it would be low cost. The area of the proposed temporary ramp is slated to be entirely filled to increase parking, so there would be no waste when it is taken out of service for any new permanent ramp. It would offer immediate relief for vessel owners trying to haul during prevailing southerly winds and not have to wait 5, 10, or longer years before grant money is available for the whole project. And this was discussed at the last 2 public meetings, as I mentioned, and was endorsed at least by the audience. But so far, I don't think it's really been in any conceptual plan, so I urge that to be considered. Lastly, again, thank you and PEDC for your efforts to improve services for our commercial fleet.
Are there any questions for John? Thank you.
What size vessel is this right here?
It's 48 feet, and the tonnage is estimated at upper 30s.
Okay. Is this one of the larger ones that you've hauled out? Is this one of your larger ones you've hauled out so far?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you.
Did you have another question, Bob?
Yeah, I do. I know I comment. I've been to most of the meetings here where this has been discussed, and I think there's some really good ideas come out of it, but there's also some ideas that came up out of those sessions that there needs to be somebody who kind of states some of these. One of them was the Corps of Engineers permits. If we apply for those Corps of Engineer permits, they're good for a 5-year period of time. They can be renewed, but then down the road, we don't know whether they will be or not be, or, history has shown they will be, but there's also a cost associated with that. The second thing I'd talk about is the Harbor Board we said South Harbor is our #1 priority. If we come up with the need for money, South Harbor's got to be it. This would take back seat, as I see it, to anything we'd have to do to add money from the municipality. But the biggest concern I have is as a management plan for this. And when we look at this, is that we say what we want to do is we want other vendors out here to do work on boats and to do and I support that. And then we also said at the last meeting is that there was a need to have, if we did the wash down, you have to have a certified operator. Whether that has to be on site or not on site, I don't know the answer to that. But when we do that, obviously that adds costs to it. Right now, we're hand-to-mouth operation on our harbor funds. What we take in, we spend. We don't have a lot of excess reserve. If we go ahead and put this in, and we have to add cost to this, that means then, does that come out of the general fund for the borough? Where does it come from? Are we going to put additional fees onto this to pay for the additional people? I just really would believe there needs to be a management plan of what we want to do for this as we get it constructed, even as we get it constructed. And right now we don't have one. Next point, the uplands there on this here, we have facilities for the fire department. I think there's a training area and there's a station area for the tanker. Once we get this developed, I'll guarantee there's going to be major conflict here between those other uses and the need for the drive down, etc. What are we going to do for the facilities? I think we have an opportunity here maybe to, if we were willing to spend some time, is to move some of those facilities someplace else and to help support the fire department with access out the road. What do we do? How do we go about it? I've heard 3 different stories now on this, and I don't know what's right on those. Yes, we can move them. No, we can't move them. And then I've heard that, if we were actually checked by our insurance carrier, it wouldn't pass muster anyhow. So what do we need to do? And I've not heard, or had seen any work done that really tells us where we need to go with this. And that bothers me. And so what we're doing is, in my mind, is we're piecemealing this whole thing. Yeah, we approved to spend $500,000 of economic development fund money, yes, and we could take the next step. We've already then committed ourselves that, yes, this becomes a priority, and yes, but we still don't know how we pay it. So the next assembly and so forth down the road, we've made a commitment that they're going to have to honor. And I'd really like to see a management plan for this, so I'll probably vote no to put it on the ballot right now, just because I want to see what a management plan for this whole thing is.
Any other comments or questions? Any response to that, Liz?
Assemblymember Lynn has his opinions. Okay. He's entitled to them.
Okay.
So, on that note about the management plan, is that something that we'd be able to do an interim in between here and when it goes to ballot in October? Or are we just leaving it as Member Lynn stated, something to think about down the road?
If I may, it's something of a chicken and the egg. The interest has been expressed to have some sort of private-public partnership out there where you might have a private operator. It's going to be difficult to put together an RFP or attract a private sector person to really commit to it until you're telling them, what exactly they're going to be responsible for. So either we're doing this project or we're not doing this project. And I think the ballot gives you the referendum. We're doing it or we're not doing it, and we're moving in that direction or we're not going to, and we're putting it on the shelf. And I think from PDC's perspective, we all know that engineering and design is very expensive. We don't want to keep chasing the design and putting money into engineering and design if it's just going to fail at the ballot. So I guess we want to know from the public, locally, are we going to be willing to put some money toward this? And if the answer is yes, then I think that gives us more confidence to push forward with the engineering, gives us more confidence to say, yeah, this is what this development is going to look like, this is what we're envisioning, and try to put something together to see if there's the private sector interest. And I know it's a little bit loose, but it's where we're at the moment. So.
Okay. And then of that, the $2.5 million or $2 million facility, will it be usable? Will it be just as usable for Mergus and other entities and private peoples will it be better off afterwards? Or are we kind of just setting a stone out to be able to then get to the final product, $5 million after that?
The $2 million is definitely a phase, but we're not going to build something that isn't usable. I mean, we understand that there's an operation there now, and we're not going to want to do anything to disrupt that. Perfect. So, if this actually, the $2 million doesn't come for 10 years and suddenly everything has doubled in price, then we might end up having to pull back and say, yeah, we can't get what we want to get for that $2 million because now, everything is twice as much as it was. So I think we have to be realistic about, what we're going to do and what we accomplish with that money, whichever grant it turns out to be, to get to a point where it's an okay stopping point, because we're not going to know for sure when the next iteration is going to come. So.
All right. Well, I guess part of that, though, is what's the mechanism then that we're going to use to get to overall management of that? Are we going to, as a borough, are we going to run it? Are we going to put it all out for bid, to make it a, overall facility with private industry running it? What's our intent? And how do we, I guess my frustration is how do we get there? Is that something that the borough should be taking on? Because right now we have 3 entities, at least, 4 entities involved with this. How do we get to yes, so to speak?
To a certain degree, I share your frustration. And it's not simple when you're dealing with multiple entities like we're dealing with. I think, in my mind's eye, I don't think it's fair to go out to look for or develop a management plan or look for a private sector partner without being able to be quite specific on what our expectation is for them to do. And as we move down this path, if we realize, yeah, all we're going to get is EDA money and we're only going to do this initial phase, well, that's something concrete that we can build an RFP around and say, here's the parameters of what we would expect from a private sector partner. If we were fortunate enough to be able to build more, then we would expand those boundaries. But I think we have to be cognizant that you can't ask someone to commit to something when you can't tell them what they're committing to, you know, and again, that's that chicken and the egg aspect of it. And there's some things that, and you raise, you know, very valid points about the fire department and the management plan and things like that, but there's only so many moving pieces that I feel like we can handle simultaneously. So I'd like to see initially a commitment that we are going to move forward, and then I think we can start trying to knock off some of those questions as we move forward and have a better sense of what we can accomplish in the short term and what's going to be pushed to the longer term. Again, I know it's still sort of vague and not as concrete as you probably would like, but it's where we're at the moment.
All right. So we will be voting on Resolution 2017-15, which is a resolution of the Petersburg Borough directing the borough clerk to submit to the qualified voters of the borough the question of spending up to $500,000 from the Economic Fund towards the cost sharing the development of a small vessel haul-out and work yard at Scow Bay. We are not approving the $500,000. We are approving sending this to the voters. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jeff?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
All right, that passes 4-1. And I think we are going to take a 5-minute break, and we will come back at... All right, we're back in session. And the next item on our agenda is 17-186, approval of to prepare a letter to Governor Walker and Lieutenant Governor Malott, asking them to send written requests for federal involvement in the transboundary mine issue. If the Assembly agrees, the clerk's office will draft a letter for the mayor's signature to the governor and lieutenant governor asking for written rather than verbal request for involvement of the U.S. State Department in developing and securing enforceable measures to defend Alaskan interests in the Alaska-BC transboundary watersheds issue. And do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Castro, that we send a letter to the governor on the transboundary mine issue. Is there any discussion?
Cindy?
Yes.
In our letter, I'd like to see it unique from the borough. One of the things I got thinking about is from the municipality's perspective. And you look at, it would affect both the Wrangell Borough, the General, and our borough significantly if those waters were somehow degraded. And I'd like to see us in our letter at least make some kind of a point that it has a major impact on the boroughs of Southeast Alaska. And not only the people themselves, but the economy. I mean, it goes quite a ways around, and I really think that's a pretty pertinent point that needs to be in there.
Duly noted. Did you have any other comment?
Well, no, just that there's been so much effort exerted by so many other groups. I feel it's important for us to maintain our solidarity with these groups and request more from our elected representatives.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And I told Cynthia I really liked the letter that they had drafted. It was a good letter. Actually, they were all very good letters when I read them.
But I agree, the Gil Nutter's letter had some specific points that were really pertinent that we could include in our letter as well. All right. If there's no other discussion, will the clerk call a roll?
Eric?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes, and that passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is 17-185, presentation to the Assembly of Certified Citizens Initiative petition to submit to the borough voters the question of allowing the operation and use of OHV on borough streets. And a citizens initiative petition to submit to the qualified voters of the Petersburg Borough the question of allowing the operation and use of off-highway vehicles on borough-owned and maintained streets was filed on June 28, 2017, and certified by Deputy Clerk Swihart as sufficient on June 29, 2017. The petition contains 283 valid borough voter signatures, the amount needed for sufficiency. Pursuant to PMC 2.44.080, the Assembly has the option to begin the process for adoption of an ordinance enacting substantially the same measure as the one contained in the initiative, or the Assembly can choose not to pursue adoption of an ordinance if we do not. The measure, as it is contained in the initiative petition, will be placed on the ballot at the October 3rd, 2017 municipal election. So if we make a motion, we are moving to pass an ordinance, and then it would not go to the voters. So is there someone who wishes to make a motion on this petition? You want clarification?
May I, please? Yes.
If we do not take any action, this goes to the voters.
Okay. And we can't have a discussion on it if we don't make a motion.
Motion can fail.
Yeah.
Corollary to that, could you make a motion to put it on the ballot?
You could, but it's going to go on the ballot anyway, so there's no point.
That motion isn't needed.
Yeah, you can make a motion just for the sake of discussion, but otherwise it just dies. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and this question will go on the October 3rd ballot for the voters to decide. The next item on our agenda is the presentation to the Assembly of the Certified Citizens Initiative petition to submit to the borough voters the question of prohibiting the addition of fluoride to the borough water system. On June 30th, 2017, a citizens initiative petition to submit to the qualified voters of the Petersburg Borough the question of prohibiting the addition of fluoride to the borough water system was filed with the clerk's office and certified by Deputy Clerk Swihart as sufficient on July 3rd, 2017. The petition contained more than 283 valid borough voter signatures needed for sufficiency. Pursuant to PMC 2.44.080, the Assembly has the option to begin the process for adoption of an ordinance enacting substantially the same measure as the one contained in the initiative petition, or the Assembly can choose not to pursue the adoption of such an ordinance. If the Assembly does not enact an ordinance adopting substantially the same measure as contained in the initiative petition, the initiative will be placed on the ballot at the October 3rd, 2017 municipal election. And so, do I have a motion on this to enact an ordinance on the addition, prohibiting the addition of fluoride to the borough water system? And it's essentially the same mechanism as the previous citizens petition.
May I ask just real quick about the presentation? Is there a presentation? Is there? Or is it?
No, there's no presentation. It's just following code. Basically, after an initiative petition has been certified as sufficient with all the signatures needed, the clerk is to present it in a meeting to the Assembly, whereby you then have the option to say, hey, prepare us an ordinance. Let's just get this done and not put it before the voters.
Okay.
So that's all it is.
going to hear a motion. This will also go on the October 3rd, 2017 voter ballot. And the next item on our agenda is communications. Does anyone have any communications other than the Coast Guard knows that they'll be visiting us tomorrow? Any communications to report? And then assembly discussion items, we have recognitions. Does anyone have any recognitions?
Oh. So I guess I informally recognize all the efforts that have had to go through to make these initiatives happen, both the fluoride and the OHV. I know there's been a lot of work put into it, and I hope that folks recognize that we aren't shirking our duties in approving those ordinances. It's just that we prefer, these being kind of controversial, that the voters are the ones to decide and how it affects the community.
Anyone else? I've got a couple. I really wanted to thank Chelsea Tremblay and Annette Wooten for taking the initiative to start the discussion both on addiction and homelessness, which I hadn't really thought about so much myself. Sounds like it's a bigger problem that we really need to be focusing on and understanding better. I also wanted to thank the folks at the Petersburg Medical Center for a very well-run paddle battle, and thank Mother Nature for the excellent weather that we had. It thundered the minute we got back to Sandy Beach, but I especially wanted to thank for their safety assistance, because they didn't get to paddle, but they did have to help with the logistics. Sarah Holmgreen, Lieutenant Rachel Kent of the Coast Guard, who was there to give a safety briefing, Mike Cottrell, Craig and Rebecca Anderson, and Richard Burke, and I don't know who the other person was in your boat, Richard, but they followed us with their boats to make sure that all of the participants were safe and got to shore at the end of the 13-mile paddle. So thank you very much for that. It was a fun event. All right. If there's nothing else to report or recognize,
I would like to recognize our emergency services group. They've responded to a fire, and they respond to frequent ambulance calls, and it's all volunteer. Thank you.
And I'm sure they probably could use more members if somebody was interested. And Sandy's putting 2 thumbs up, so yes. And with that, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Meeting is concluded. Thank you.